Namo Bhagavate Narayanam Namaskritya Narum Jaya Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriya Nashtiprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Ter Bhavati Nashtiki. So continuing with the discussion on Prabhupada Lilamrita by Srila Goswami, chapter 40th. Prabhupada is in Dallas, 1972, installing Radhakala Chanji. Janma Devi Dasi, however, unauthorizedly removed the original paint from the deities and began to repaint them. When Prabhupada heard this, he became furious. He called the Dallas president, Srila Goswami, to his room and demanded an explanation. Sasuru said that he was a fool, but that Janva had also acted without his permission. Prabhupada then called for Janva and yelled at her furiously. She began to cry. Why have you done this? Prabhupada demanded. Nonsense, was her choked reply. Nonsense, Srila Prabhupada affirmed. Suicidal nonsense. You're a nonsense and you'll always remain a nonsense. What are you going to do about this? Well, Srila Prabhupada Janva replied weakly. I called up Bharadraj in Los Angeles and he said if I use a certain kind of paint. Bharadraj, Prabhupada yelled, who is this Bharadraj? I am your spiritual master and I am sitting before you. Why do you not ask me? Disgusted, he then turned to the others in the room. So what is to be done about this? One of the ladies said that with a quick drying paint, they could repaint the deities just before in time for the installation. Yes, Srila Prabhupada said, do it immediately. Janva stayed up all night, carefully repainting the deities as before. Early the next morning, which was to be the morning of the deity installation, Krishna looked very beautiful, although his body was tacky in spots from the fresh paint. During that morning's walk around White Rock Lake, while talking philosophically about various topics, Prabhupada turned casually to Satsuru Maharaj and asked about the preparations for the installation. When Satsuru said he was uncertain whether Krishna's paint would be dry enough, Prabhupada suddenly stopped. If the deities were not ready, he said there was no use in his staying any longer in Dallas. Turning to his secretary, he told him to change their flight reservations as soon as possible. Satsuru begged forgiveness and said that maybe everything would still be done on schedule. Prabhupada's angry mood changed and he continued walking, talking about other matters. Later in his room, Prabhupada talked alone to Satsuru, continuing on the point of his morning lecture about materialistic life. In a casual way, as most people would talk about ordinary things, Prabhupada spoke of the foolishness of the conditioned souls. They think that just by having a big family and being absorbed in mundane activities, they do not have to concern themselves with death or with the next life. As Prabhupada spoke, he shook his head in disbelief, considering the incredulous position of the materialist. So, yes, this is the thought process of materialistic people. If I have big family, big house, lots of money in the bank, I just enjoy life. And nobody is concerned about next life or death. Some death fear is there because we see other people in our relations and circle, they die. But otherwise, they don't even care for, bother about what's going to happen. And definitely not about next life. This is Maya. This is ignorance. All of Prabhupada's disciples noted the same amazing thing about him. Wherever he went, his consciousness was always in transcendence, whether staying up late, worrying and talking about Bombay, or criticizing devotees for repainting the deity. His mind was ever moving from one Krishna conscious consideration to another. The devotees with him would sometimes observe his awesome Krishna consciousness from a respectful distance. At other times, they might, in the name of service, speak up and become more personally involved. Or they might find themselves thrust under the direct scrutiny of his demanding attention. No one could presume or accurately predict in what way Prabhupada would act in his constant grave service to his spiritual master. While sitting with Sasuru Maharaj, Prabhupada began humming and singing a Sanskrit phrase from the morning's Bhagavatam class, Griheshu Grihi Medina. Then he asked, so how is the deity? Prabhupada said he thought he was dry. Prabhupada stood and walked into the room where Janvas was examining the repainted deity. Calmly he stood before Radha and Krishna, singing to himself. Yes, he said, now it's all right. Later that morning in the temple room, Prabhupada sat on his Vyasasana and installed Radha and Krishna, reciting the prayers from the Brahma Samhita. He then offered the first arti to the deities, who had been hastily dressed and placed on the almost bare altar. Prabhupada seemed pleased, however, and later went up to his room and wrote on a piece of paper, Radha Kalachandji, the deity of Dallas. September 12, 1972. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Kalachandji, he said, meant black moon. That's also a name we don't hear anywhere, Kalachandji. But very stout deity. And there's another story behind Radharani of this deity. Two Radharani's murtis or deities were shipped from India to New York. So one Radharani then from New York was shipped to Dallas, one to Detroit. And somehow the devotee who shipped them, he switched. I don't know, he purposely did or he just didn't know. So Radharani that came to Dallas was supposed to go to Detroit. And Radharani that went to Detroit, supposed to come to Dallas. But if you look at the picture of the deities, I have been at both the places. They look perfectly, wonderfully, matched with the Krishna deities at those locations. So it was Krishna's arrangement. And but somehow it happened and they were installed just like that. Prabhupada was preparing to return soon to India via western route, and he paid another visit to his Western World headquarters in Los Angeles. On the very day he arrived, however, he wrote more directions to the devotees in Bombay, reassuring them that Juhuland was not just a trouble spot, but a special place where a great plan would be carried out. It was worth fighting for. Now I am anxious to hear if the conveyance deed has been signed and what are the contents. Kindly send me the copy duly signed as quickly as possible. This will give me great relief. As soon as the conveyance has been signed, you may begin the building work immediately. I am coming to India soon, at least by October. I want to see that the building projects in Bombay, Mayapur and Vrindavan are going on nicely. This Bombay project is one of our most important projects in the whole world, and I'm looking to you and others there in Bombay to see that it is done very magnificently. So yes, Bombay Juhu project, a wonderful project. And now, of course, a few years ago, devotees did another extension of that building. So yes, great project. Prabhupada's secretary had recently shown him a new advertisement booklet printed by Air India, in which the art theme was exclusively dedicated to Krishna in Vrindavan. Prabhupada was encouraged to see that Air India was enticing tourists to come to India to experience Krishna culture. This confirmed his idea that in the future, Hare Krishna Land and his other Indian projects would be important showpieces for tourists wanting to experience real Vedic culture. Mail from Bombay always received first priority, and every morning Prabhupada would ask for news from Bombay, giving any letter from Giriraj immediate attention. Early in October, he received a long letter from Giriraj. We just cannot control the material nature, and although everything is going on slow, Mrs. Morarji, Mr. Munim, the bank, and Mr. N all feel that they're proceeding as quickly as possible, and they do not respond very favorably to being over-reminded by me of the urgency of the matter and of your anxiety that it will be finished. Nothing new had developed, the deed still had not been signed. Although Giriraj said he now had no intentions of resigning his post, Prabhupada, after studying the letter, concluded that the other senior devotees in India should also help. He therefore wrote to Kamal Krishna Goswami and Bhavanand, both in Vrindavan, asking them to go immediately to Bombay and try to expedite the conveyance. So Prabhupada knew the real problem behind delaying this issue. Prabhupada was asking Tamal Krishna Goswami to revive his active status as a manager in India. Giraj is finding difficulty. From his letter, I can understand. So I think you have to revive your position as GVC again and look after all the business of India affairs nicely. Prabhupada also wrote Giraj informing him that other devotees were coming to help and reminding him to also work with the board of trustees. I cannot tax my brain so much from such distant places as to what to do if there is any difficulty. Therefore, I am relying completely on you, my trusted senior disciples, to finish up these things nicely. And can we believe trusted senior disciples? This is 1972. And Prabhupada started the movement in 1966. And these devotees didn't join him until 67 or 68. So 4 years only. And he's saying, your trusted senior disciples. Not just Prabhupada had faith in them, but Prabhupada also empowered them. They were all surrendered. That's a different story. But Prabhupada also empowered them. Prabhupada repeatedly instructed the managers in Bombay not to deviate from the terms of the purchase agreement. He was willing, as a matter of concession, to pay the 5 lakhs to be deducted from the total price, but no more changes. The devotees should press Mr. N to the original agreement. Prabhupada was worried that he had not heard from his lawyer, Mr. D. 2 weeks before, he had telegrammed most of Mr. N and Mr. D asking for reports on the delays, but he had not received any replies from either of them. He had since written to another lawyer, a friend in Bombay, asking about the delay, and in Los Angeles he received a reply. Mr. D was no longer his attorney. A couple of days after receiving this shocking news, Prabhupada received a formal letter from the office of Mr. D informing him of the same. Of all the recent news from Bombay, this was the most disturbing. Prabhupada began to see how Mr. N had been devising a devious plot from the beginning. It was not just a matter of slowness or bureaucratic delay. Mr. D had been in league with Mr. N. They were cheaters, so now it was going to be a real fight. ISKCON would have to go to court and file criminal cases against Mr. N. There was no avoiding the fight. But Prabhupada still felt that his position was legally very strong. Before leaving Los Angeles, Prabhupada thought of a further tactic. He wrote to Giraj that he should put a notice in the newspaper advising the public that ISKCON had signed an agreement for purchasing Mr. N's land at Juhu. He then traveled to Berkeley. So, another tactic. For this Juhu land, Prabhupada had to fight, really fight. In the end, we got this land, and Prabhupada in the end said, oh, it was a good fight, but we won. October 6, during his brief visit to Berkeley, Prabhupada met with a group of professors from the University of California and also installed Radhakrishna deities in the Berkeley temple. But still, he was meditating on Bombay. He wrote to Tamal Krishna Goswami. The Bombay dealing has been muddled by the tactics of Mr. N and Mr. D. Giraj is in trouble. He is a child in these worldly dealings, so immediately go to help him. But you must be careful to pay the money in the court, registrar's office, and not in the hand of Mr. N or his solicitor. Settle up the things properly, otherwise let us go to the court for specific action, either civic or criminal, against the tactics of Mr. N. Prabhupada decided to send Karandhar, whom he considered expert, to help in Bombay. He also wanted to send Shyamsundar, but Shyamsundar had gone to London regarding a large country estate George Harrison was donating. So that was the Bhaktivedanta Manor, where George Harrison of Beatles donated, and ISKCON got such a big property. Prabhupada notified Shyamsundar, however, that once the London transaction was completed, he should go to Bombay. Prabhupada was ready for the fight. He would not be cheated. During his return trip to India, Prabhupada again visited Hawaii. Then on October 11th, he went for the first time to Manila, where a small number of disciples had arranged preaching programs for him, both in the temple and at the Hotel Intercontinental. In Manila, Philippines, Prabhupada carefully considered his position regarding the Juhu property and concluded that he would come out victorious. He listed the points of his argument in a letter to Giriraj. First, we have purchased all the conditions as purchaser. Second, Mr. N has purposefully delayed with a motive to cheat us, as he had done with some others in this connection. Third, but this time he cannot cheat us because we are in the possession of the land and our deity Radha Krishna is installed there. Four, therefore we must immediately go to the court for enforcing him to execute the conveyance immediately. Five, even if the court case goes on for a long time, still our business there cannot be stopped. Six, without going to the court, we cannot make any compromise with him. Seven, but I think we can arrange the full amount of 14 lakhs to get out this rascal out of the scene. Eight, but we cannot do it without going to the court, otherwise we shall become a party for breaking the purchase agreement. Therefore, we have to go to the court before making any compromise. So he was thinking every way possible. But legal option is a option he wanted to take. Chapter 41, The Battle for Bombay. Vrindavan, October 17, 1972. Prabhupada had come to Vrindavan to observe the Kartik season from October 16 to November 14th. He planned to lecture daily at the Samadhi of Rupa Goswami in the courtyard of the Radha Damodar temple, speaking from the Nectar of Devotion, his own translation of Rupa Goswami's book, Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu. On his western tour, he had invited his devotees to join him for Kartik in Vrindavan, and now a few dozen devotees from America, Europe, India, and other parts of the world had gathered to be with him. So many devotees came from West. He was concerned with developing his Vrindavan project, so rather than immediately rushing to Bombay, he had come here first, sending some of his leading disciples to tackle the problems in Bombay. Now, like a general engaged on a different front, he awaited word from his lieutenants in Bombay. He moved into his two small rooms at the Radha Damodar temple, while his disciples stayed nearby in the former palace of Maharaj of Bharatpur, an old building near the Yamuna. So that place is at Keshi Ghat. Although Prabhupada was introducing his disciples to Vrindavan, he was also introducing the residents of Vrindavan to his disciples. Already his group was encountering some of the same attitudes. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and his party of pilgrims had met in 1932. The people's refusal to accept low-born persons as Vaishnavas. Prabhupada trusted, however, that if his disciples could construct a wonderful temple for Krishna and Balram, the hearts of the Vrindavan residents would change and they would accept his disciples. He tolerated the roughness and slowness of his disciples, and when Vrindavan residents came to see, he humbly requested they also overlook his disciples' faults and recognize them as genuine devotees of Krishna. After all, they had given up sinful life and were regularly chanting the holy names of God. Prabhupada lectured both morning and evening, sitting on a simple asana about 2 feet high, a bare bulb suspended over his head. Prabhupada would address his disciples and the few interested guests who sat before him. Some of the devotees had speculated that since they were now in Vrindavan, Prabhupada would probably talk on highly elevated spiritual topics, such as Krishna's ras with the gopis, but it was not so. Rather, one of his disciples would read from the Nectar of Devotion, and Prabhupada would interject extensive philosophical comments on attaining pure love of Krishna through the successive stages of Bhakti Yoga. So this lecture series, Nectar of Devotion, 1972, very, very popular among devotees. And Prabhupada didn't go into Krishna's pastimes or in super pastimes, Ras Leela or his pastimes with gopis. Yes, into philosophy. While Prabhupada's talks were especially for his disciples, he also stressed that the Brahmins of India accept the Western Vaishnavas, and he cited dozens of scriptural references to prove his point that birth status, being a material designation, did not apply in spiritual life. Stressing preaching as the essence of Krishna consciousness, he urged the disciples present to continue propagating the Krishna consciousness movement. Prabhupada disciples were thrilled by these talks and by Prabhupada's personal dealings with them in the intimate atmosphere of his rooms at the Radha Damodar temple, which he referred to as his eternal residence, the place where he had actually begun his plans for the Krishna consciousness movement. His disciples could hear him rise early and begin translating Srimad Bhagavatam and dictating his purports. At Aarti time, he would open the shutters of his room and behold the deities. At other times, the devotees might see him walking on the terrace chanting japa, and they found him always available to answer their questions and help them with their personal problems. So that's at Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan. Tamal Krishna Goswami, Shyam Sundar, and Karandhar arrived in Bombay. Things had worsened, Giraj informed them, when Mr. N had seen the notice in the newspaper publicly advising that ISKCON had entered into an agreement for the Jew property, he had become furious. Giraj had gone to him with folded hands and bowed down before him, but Mr. N would not be appeased. He had gone back on all his promises and had cancelled the sales agreement on the plea that the devotees had not obtained the deed within a 6-month period. The 2 lakh down payment he had claimed was now his, and the devotees should vacate the land immediately. So, yes, lots of problems in Bombay happened. Mr. N had shut off the water supply to the Hare Krishna land. Several days later, a hoodlum had shown up at the entrance to the property, brandishing a machete where devotees passed by. A friend of Mr. N had printed a handbill ascribing scandalous behavior to the American Hare Krishna devotees and was having it distributed at the nearby Ville Parle train station. Although few devotees had left and the others wanted to, about 30 devotees still remained in Bombay. So can we imagine devotees being threatened with machete and then handbills being distributed that they are all scandalous people? And in fact, I'm not sure about the timing. That time that Devanand's movie also came out, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, and in which the Hare Krishna devotees were shown smoking ganja and doing all sorts of drug-related things. The first thing to do, Karandar said, was to find a new lawyer, and he went to Bombay's most prominent solicitors and hired a specialist in land transactions and conveyances. Next, the leading devotees and the solicitor met with Mr. N in his office. Mr. N was stubborn and uncooperative, and the ISKCON's lawyer was threatening. A court battle seemed inevitable. Tamal Krishna Goswami, Karandar, Bhavanand, and Shyam Sundar talked together, and the more they talked, the more they began to see the entire Juhu scheme was impossible. Even without Mr. N's treachery, just to live on the land was very difficult. The devotees and the deities had such poor living facilities that the roof leaked and the cement floor was crumbling. Rats, flies, cockroaches, village dogs, and mosquitoes infested the place, with even an occasional poisonous snake. Devotees were always contracting tropical diseases, especially malaria and hepatitis. So much they went through. So although ISKCON's new lawyer was prepared to take the case to the court, the devotees were hesitant. Mr. N had said that they, not he, were criminals because they had not gotten permission from the charity commissioner. They were on his land illegally. He said he would sue for damages. Even seemed to be on the verge of same violent action. Considering all angles, the leaders whom Prabhupada had entrusted to solve the Juha entanglement decided that ISKCON should relinquish the land. Drafting a joint letter to Srila Prabhupada, they had Shyamsundar hand-delivered it to him in Vrindavan. So, more things will unfold. We'll stop here. So tomorrow we'll read more. See anybody has any questions or comments?
प्रभु जी हमारे यहाँ ना अभी भी लोगों को लगता है that ISKCON is still in ganja and charas and all these things because of that movie. That Roja is still there.
या क्या कर
है
सकते
ना,
हैं।
है ना, मतलब है ना still.
इनफैक्ट पता नहीं किसने बताया था, ये मैंने कहीं पढ़ा था कि देवानंद he came to
हाँ
meet Prabhupada
हाँ
and Prabhupada refused to meet him. He said he had put my devotees in such a bad light. He showed them in such a bad light. I wouldn't even, if I'm correct, he said I would not even piss on his face for Devanand. But that's Prabhupada. Chalo, anyway, all have a safe and
anyway.
wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Ram.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Jai